Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about how to grade findings and how to present the findings to medical device companies when you're conducting an audit. I'm not talking about just how you score something. Is it a major? Is it a minor? Is it a 1, 2, 3, or 4? I'm talking specifically about how do you present it to somebody? How do you say this is a nonconformity and this is why? Or this is something you really need to fix, even though it's not a nonconformity yet. And how you do that is somewhat about being diplomatic, but you also want to add value and you want to be very precise because you don't want them to misunderstand what you're saying. You never want it to be a surprise either. So don't save it for the end. Don't save it for the report. Make sure that when you discover what the problem is or see a problem, you present it to them right away, because maybe you're just talking to the wrong person or you're looking at an incomplete record and they have another record that supports what you're looking for and it's not a nonconformity at all. So make sure you don't surprise people. Let them know as soon as you think you found something and say, this is what I'm looking for. This would make it a nonconformity. If you had this, it would be a major. If you had this, it would be a minor. If you had this, it probably wouldn't be a nonconformity at all. It would be an OFI. Explain to them what the differences would be that would justify different gradings. But if they have the documents you're looking for, say if you have this, this, and this, then I don't have to write a finding at all, and you're compliant. So make sure you communicate that to them as you're doing the audit. And as I'm going through these slides, I'll give you a couple of opinions or recommendations that I have. There is a standard out there. It is ISO 17021-1. It's a 2015 version. They have an actual definition for what a minor is, what a major is, and that's what the certification bodies are supposed to be using. But right in the definitions of those, it's very clear it's subjective grading. And that's very difficult for somebody that's not a professional auditor and hasn't done this hundreds of times and had lots of practice. And other people giving them feedback on their grading. So you want to make sure that if you're not in that category, you're sticking to something that's much more objective. This is a nonconformity, this is not. So you're not spending a lot of time arguing over it when it doesn't need to be. The ultimate goal here is we're trying to improve the quality system. So keep it simple, grade on the tougher side of things, and implement CAPAs when you should. Because the third-party auditors, let them be subjective. They're doing the spot checks. Internal audits, you're just trying to catch things before the third-party auditors do and try to make your quality system better. So take that as your overall context of the information that I'm presenting before you say, but this person said this and this person said this. Your goal is to improve the quality system, so grade on the harder side and stay objective. And no surprises. One more time, no surprises. So when you're generating findings, this is the section of the standard, ISO 19011. 19011 is a standard that tells you how you're supposed to be doing audits. So this is the one section of that standard that 6.4.8 is the one section that tells you how to generate the audit findings. In general, they should be what is the number or reference number of the findings, so you have traceability to a specific report. Number two, you want to indicate what is the finding? So just a sentence, maybe not even a full sentence, maybe a phrase saying the procedure is inadequate, for example. That would be a very common finding. Or missing training record would be another one. And then you get into what the specific requirement is. And over the years, we've tried different approaches to writing what is required. But now that everything is digital, almost nobody's handwriting anymore. Everybody's typing or doing recordings or transcriptions. So we tend to do everything digitally, and most of the time people are doing remote audits. There are some people that are doing on-site audits when it's really necessary, but they're trying to take advantage of doing remote audits whenever they can. So when you have a remote audit, just copy and paste the requirement. Do a screen capture, hit print screen, select the little section and paste it right into your audit report. Don't do any typing. Don't bother. You're not going to change the wording. You're referencing somebody else's requirement in a regulation or a standard or in a procedure. So if they gave you the procedure, say, can you send that to me? And I'll just copy and paste in the requirements so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Same thing if you're actually on site doing an audit and you see something that's wrong, ask the guide to take a picture. People get really uncomfortable about the auditor taking pictures, like no pictures here, no pictures here. Ask the guide to do it. Say, hey, can you take a picture of this? I want to put it in the audit report so people don't misunderstand what I'm talking about. It's an internal audit report. You got nothing to hide. Now, if management says they don't want that in the report, fine, delete it. But at least they've seen it when you're discussing things at the closing meeting. Okay? At least they've seen it, and everybody's seen what you saw, and the guide took the picture. So you don't have the picture, they do. And if they don't even want you to get it, you say, well, at least distribute it to the senior management so they can see what we saw, so they understand what's going on. And the way I found this particular clause here in the standard, all I did is search for the word grading. That's why it's highlighted here. It shows grading is highlighted. So that's how you find how to grade findings. There are also a couple other standards out there that you can use. So I'm gonna show you what those are. Not right now, but in a later slide I have it. This slide here is a copy and paste. Once again, I copy and pasted right from Medical Device Academy's own procedure. And recently I realized I need to make a little correction in this, so I put that in this slide. But this is the objective grading process that is recommended by MDSAP or GHTF. So MDSAP is the Medical Device Single Audit Program. GHTF is the Global Harmonization Task Force. Global Harmonization Task Force was replaced by the International Medical Device Regulators Forum because the regulators didn't want to involve industry anymore. So in here, what we have is a quantitative scoring, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for the grading of your findings. And we start with grading the clause of the finding first. Is it an indirect clause or is it a direct clause? And the mistake I forgot is I didn't include these exceptions. So 4.2.3 is a clause that they consider direct because it's the medical device file. You're required to have a record of your medical device file. That would also be a technical file or a DMR. That should be a direct clause according to those guidances. The direct clauses are 6.4 through 8.5.3 in the 1345 standard, except for 824, which they say should be indirect. 824, if you're not familiar with it, is the internal auditing clause. So if you have a finding against internal auditing, it's not directly affecting the quality system or not directly affecting the conformity of the product, it's directly affecting your quality system. So it's an indirect impact on quality of product. So they want that one to be indirect. So those are the only two exceptions to those clause ranges there. But it's so easy to just say, oh, I go to 1345, figure out what clause it is, copy and paste in the requirement, and then the scoring is based on what clause number it is. And they only have two exceptions, and they're easy to remember. So once I've decided whether it's indirect or direct, that gives me a 1 or a 3. Now I have to decide, do any of the escalation rules apply? And generally, if you're not going to use a numbered scoring system, I recommend using these same escalation rules as your criteria for being a major. If none of the escalation rules apply, then I would make it a minor. If any of the escalation rules apply, then I would make it a major. There's some subjectivity there. Leave that to the regulators. You stick to just a simple, direct approach. So if this is a repeat quality issue, so that means if you look up the definition of it, anything that happened in the last 3 audits. And I mean the last 3 years of audits. So if you do multiple audits throughout the year, it'd be a lot more than 3. But the last 3 years of audits. Next, we have absence of the process or procedure and failure to implement the process or procedure. So this means you have no process. It doesn't exist. You have no records, you have no procedure, nothing. That's what it takes to escalate that one. So if you haven't had this happen in the last 3 years and you have something, you have a procedure, you have a record, you have something, neither one of those rules are going to apply. The last one is really clear cut. Did you ship any of the product that's non-conforming? If you ship non-conforming product, that would also be an escalation rule. So you have a labeling error, but you haven't shipped it yet, no escalation rule. You have a labeling error and ship some of it, now you escalate because you also have to recall that product. So we have 3 different escalation rules. They're very clear cut. Some people like to say, well, that's not a major, that's a critical finding. Don't make it more complex than it needs to be. Just stick to this system. You will really thank yourself. Minors, no escalation rules. Majors, escalation rules. Now, what if it's not a nonconformity? Then we use the term opportunity for improvement. The third-party auditors are not supposed to do any OFIs because they're not supposed to be giving you any advice or consulting. When you're doing supplier audits or internal audits, you can consult all you want. So that's why we have OFIs, or opportunities for improvement, in internal audits and supplier audits. And that's where the real value add comes from a good auditor. So you should have some OFIs, and probably quite a few of them, but don't insert your opinion if you don't have the expertise to really have a strong opinion about this works, this doesn't, and this is why. Okay, now we'll go on to the next option for grading. So as I said, don't use critical as a grade. I don't really like that approach. The people that use critical, they're saying, well, this could be a 43. Almost anything could be a 43 if the inspector is in a bad mood. So anything non-conformity could be a 43. 43 is just the number of the form. That means they found something and they decided, instead of making it a verbal comment in the meeting, they put it actually in their report. And they maybe train somebody, so they're trying to keep everything black and white for that trainee. So they may be grading things a little tougher than they normally would. So you don't know for sure whether it would be a 43 or not. You just know whether it's non-conforming or not. So I would eliminate critical from your vocabulary. I don't think it's helpful in the context of grading findings. Majors, like I said, escalation, major, non-escalated, minor, if they don't like numbering. And they're afraid, like, we don't want to do MDSAP. Okay, we'll call them majors and minors, but this is the guidance document I'm using for deciding whether it's major or minor, so we're very objective. Now, the next thing here is opportunities for improvement. Like I said, this is where I think the value add really comes. We're supposed to be helping people improve the quality system when we do audits, and we're supposed to be verifying that the quality system is effective and it's been fully implemented, and we're supposed to be identifying things before outside third-party auditors find. But if I'm saying it's not a nonconformity, it's an OFI, I like to word it in such a way so it's very clear that this is a suggestion. It's something I think could be improved, but isn't absolutely necessary because it's not nonconforming. If it looks like it would be nonconforming, I like to add a sentence saying why this is not a nonconformity. If there's any gray area, I'll add a sentence to the end of the OFI saying this was not a nonconformity and this is why. And a good example of that would be, this is going to be a potential nonconformity when the QMSR is implemented February 2nd. So you don't have it now. You don't have this process or procedure. Let's say it's post-market surveillance. You don't have that now. You're compliant with the QSR, but you're not compliant with QMSR, which comes in on February 2nd of next year. So therefore, it's a potential future nonconformity, and that's why I've graded it as an OFI. That makes it really clear. When you're an experienced auditor and you know about something that's coming and you want to grade it that way, because somebody reads this a year from now, they're going to say, oh, that's a nonconformity. Well, it wasn't at the time I wrote it. So that helps. Next, if it's a recommendation, I think this would make your quality system run better. It would make things smoother. It would make it easier. This might be a better way to do it. that's a recommendation, and it depends a lot on your experience and how well you understand what's going on around you. You walked in today and you think you know everything, but you haven't worked there. Maybe they've thought of that, tried it, and it failed. So you need to word these things with consider trying this. Okay, he's suggesting it, and we're not going to do that. We're going to take that with a grain of salt and say, no, we're not going to do that. Why? Because we tried it before and it didn't work. But the third possibility, which was my first bullet here, if I wasn't able to gather enough information, so I only have a limited amount of time in an audit, and sometimes the person that you need to speak to or the record you need to review is not available in a timely manner. You could take the approach of writing it up as a nonconformity and then have the other person do an investigation, determine it wasn't a nonconformity, you just didn't have the record. That creates a lot more work for everybody. I prefer to say, I was unable to find it, I was unable to determine it, and this is what I was looking for, and it wasn't available at the time. And the audit program manager or the process owner, whoever owns that project or process, they're responsible for looking it up. They have that action item. And once they determine whether it is or is not, they can determine whether a cap is needed or not. But I'm not going to force them to do it when I don't know everything yet because I don't have all the records. So I think that's a better way than writing it up automatically as a nonconformity and then having them have to do extra paperwork to show that it's not, just because the paperwork wasn't available when you asked for it. So those are how I look at opportunities for improvement. And I tend to have a lot of them. And we try to use that as a sort of an indicator, like we're adding a lot of value. And most auditees say, yes, that really helps. Well, that's part of what we want from you. Okay, next slide here. So general grading for findings here. When you are grading a finding, explain the method of reporting the findings. And it actually says in clause 6.4.3 of the ISO 19011 standard for auditors, you should explain the method of reporting your findings that you're going to put in the report during your opening meeting. It's a good idea to repeat that during the closing meeting because not always all the same people are present. In general, you should be following the procedure. So if the procedure for internal auditing or supplier auditing says do it this way, you should be doing it that way. Otherwise, you've created a nonconformity by not doing it that way. And that procedure should mirror the grading of your third-party auditor. That way, your third-party auditor comes in and what they think is a major and what you think is a major are the same thing. But as I said, some of their wording from the 17021 standard is a somewhat subjective, and I recommend avoiding that. So make sure that you're following them, but try to be objective and a little bit more conservative than they would be. When in doubt, raise it as a conformity, as a nonconformity, so that way they're not saying you're grading things soft and that should have been a nonconformity when it wasn't. Use the same risk-based approach grading that I identified there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or major, minor, for your supplier auditing and your CAPAs. There's a requirement to use a risk-based approach to processes in 1345. So here's a simple approach, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, grading of findings based on the clause that's impacted and whether there's an escalation rule applying. You could use that exact same escalation process as a risk-based approach to supplier auditing in CAPAs as well as your internal auditing. So I highly recommend that. And once again, when you are grading any of the findings, make sure there are no surprises. At the time you are collecting the evidence, that's the time to say, well, this is what the standard says. This is what the regulation says. This is what I'm seeing. It's not complying. I need this. Do you have a record of this? Can you show me this? And then it won't be a nonconformity. To show them, I'm trying to help you. If you can show me this, then it won't be a nonconformity. Oh, well, you don't have that. Well, if I find this in previous audit reports, that would mean it's a repeat and it would be a major, and we would have to add one as an escalation rule. If you had no procedures and no records, then it's a complete absence and it would be a major. Sometimes, if you're absolutely sure it's going to be a minor, there's nothing wrong with explaining to them again, this is what would be a major, it's not a major. Just to put them at ease, like telling them if you had a repeat, if you had no records and no process, no procedure, then it would be a major. If you were shipping non-conforming product, it would be a major, but none of those are applying, so it's only a minor. Set the stage and categorize it for them as this isn't the end of the world. This is just a finding. And don't worry, you just are going to write a kappa. And, when you're presenting that this is going to be a finding, this is a perfect time to say, do you have any questions about how you're going to do the investigation? Do you have any questions about what kind of containment or corrections might be needed or corrective actions? You're an expert auditor. You might have some suggestions in that. And remember, internal auditing, supplier auditing, you're allowed to consult. You're allowed to give advice. Third parties can't. You could ask them what's best practices, and if they happen to memorize the different guidance documents, say the answer you're looking for might be found in this guidance. I did that a lot as a third-party auditor. That was the dancing the fine line that I was allowed to. I could reference a guidance and say, what you're looking for might be there, but I can't give you advice. And I even had an observer from MHRA. He complimented me and said that was very clever. Like, you can't give advice, but you can make them aware there's a guidance document they should be reading. So that's what I did. And because it was memorized, I might be able to say, in this clause, maybe the answer you're looking for can be found. So just gave them a hint at what clause number they might want to read. So if you're at that level, you could even pull it out and say, here it is. This is what you need to do. This is best practice. That really helps people out a lot. So that's the general approach for grading findings. Findings are not always negative. There are positive ones and negative ones. The positive ones, what are the strengths of your quality system? You want to make sure you say there are some strengths in their quality system. Say what the weaknesses are. Those should match up with the nonconformities. Make sure you've presented their OFIs. These are suggestions, things you should consider, not required, and definitely indicate if there is something that is timely. Like, this needs to be done by this date to prevent a nonconformity because the QMSR comes up February 2nd, something like that. One last thing I'm going to provide for you here before we go. These are other resources. So I mentioned 17021, and because I say it really fast, I wanted to put it on the screen so you can see it. So this is the standard that third-party auditors use, but it happens to have an actual definition now in the 2015 version for what is a nonconformity, what is a minor, and what is a major. I don't agree with them. I don't recommend them, but it exists. So if you want to use that subjective definition, go right ahead. You're pulling it right from the 17021 standard. The one that I feel is much better and much more helpful, and I actually show definitions in the training, it's ISO 19011. It's a 2018 version for auditors. So if you're doing auditing, you should be familiar with that standard and have a copy of it. The MDSAP grading guidance that I referenced, and I explained what is a minor, what is a major, what is direct and what is indirect, and what exceptions there are based on scoring numbers, whether it's a 1 or a 3. That's from this MDSAP AU P0037.001. And that originally came from a GHTF guidance that I've also put the screen capture up here. So you can go find that. This is the document number up here. This is the date it was released. So it's kind of old, and you really can get 99% of what you need out of this MDSAP document. But there's some stuff in there in that GHTF that is nowhere else that tells you how to write a nonconformity. So the step-by-step, what should be in a nonconformity when you write it. And that's best practice. If you want additional training on how to grade findings and how to write the nonconformities step-by-step and want to see some actual examples, we're actually going to be doing that in our lead auditor course, which releases in December. So take a look at our website, medicaldeviceacademy.com, and put in the search bar, lead auditor, and you'll find the page. The pre-orders begin December 1st, and you can actually start taking the course. It's on demand and fully recorded. It'll be starting December 19th. So If you're interested, check it out there. Thank you very much, and hope you have a great week, and see you next week. Bye-bye.